To speak more on this and the findings of the Stellenbosch University Council, let's now welcome Jaco Rabie from the Wilgenhof Residence Alumni Association. Jaco, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. So just give us your reaction to, firstly, the Council's decision to close the residence and, of course, where you stand in as far as the group of parents and students that are planning to approach the courts to seek an urgent interdict against the closure of this residence.
Yeah, good afternoon. As far as the decision to close Wilgenhof is concerned, the Alumni Association is disappointed. We're not entirely surprised, but we do think that the university has taken a decision here based on expedience rather than a principle-based decision. Bear in mind that the decision to close is being justified apparently by the need to renovate residence showers and bathrooms next year for a period of 12 months. But in our view, this is nothing but a fairly obvious attempt to break the back of the Wilgenhof community by closing the residence next year and achieving a closure through essentially an ulterior motive, which is disappointing.
Now, I hear your comments. You're saying that this is an attempt to break the back of the Wilgenhof community, but it does exist within the university context. And just having listened to the chair of the Stellenbosch University, Nikki Newton-King, saying in a statement, of course, and of course, just earlier on our program, that the decision was essentially to support the momentum that speaks to renewal, a reimagined future, she said, that seeks really to bring about a meaningful and systemic change to the university, which is aligned to the institution's vision as well as the country's constitution. What do you make then of her statements?
I don't think in principle we disagree with anything Ms. Newton-King says as it relates to vision or the future. In fact, the Wilgenhof Alumni Association has made many submissions in this regard, offering alternatives and offering a way forward, recognizing that Wilgenhof is integrally part of the Stellenbosch University community, recognizing that there have been practices in the past which have been unacceptable, which have put the university in a difficult position. For those practices, apologies have been offered. But where we diverge is when it comes to closing down the community. We don't see how you effectively reimagine, rejuvenate, and transform when there's nobody in Wilgenhof. And our point is that all of these objectives, laudable as they are, can be achieved without having to close the residence.
And just, based on those comments, given that the Wilgenhof Residence Alumni Association understands then the decision that speaks to change and the decision that speaks to reimagination and renewal emanates from, as you've also alluded to now, past transgressions that are very racial in their form and very traumatic. The university has also said that they've received numerous submissions from parents and students supporting the move to close the residency. And let's be clear here, this is just for 1 year before they will reopen again in 2026. So should you not be supporting and at least standing with those that feel traumatized and are still part of the community?
Yeah, look, I think I'll take issue with a couple of points there. Firstly, we're not aware of extensive support for closure of the residence specifically received by the university. What we are aware of is that the panel that was appointed to investigate ran a multi-week investigation, interviewed dozens of witnesses, saw hundreds of documents, and failed to find a single specific instance of racism or abuse. Insofar as they were findings of racism, it related to generalized implications relating to past practices. We have taken issue with these findings before. We continue to take issue with the findings of racism. It should be noted that insofar as the university are giving reasons for the closure, they are not referencing racism whatsoever. I think because they realize those findings in the report are entirely unsustainable. And yes, there have been past practices that were problematic. They were not racialized practices, but clearly in the context of South Africa, those practices, past practices were problematic. but they have been eliminated. None of those things exist. It is not necessary to close down the residence and effectively punish the current residents in Wilgenhof for discontinued practices of yesteryear. The impact on the current residents is what we should be worrying about. This is a community that is wholesome, vibrant, inclusive, supportive. There has been overwhelming support from current residents, past residents, their parents, residents of color, Black Wilgenhoffers have come out with a loud voice, speaking of an inclusive and accepting community. Those are the voices that we should be listening to, and we just fail to see what is being achieved by closing down a space which apparently reflects what the university wants, an inclusive and transformed space with 200 persons living happily together.
Jaco, very last question from me as we close. Your university, or your former university, Stellenbosch University, keeps making headlines for the wrong things, I might add, outside, of course, of the fantastic, faculties that it's known for. And most of those things are of a racial nature, which are traumatic by themselves. And these have made global headlines. What do you think the problem is? And where do you think the solutions lie?
Well, I mean, I can't really speak intelligently about previous issues at Stellenbosch University. I recognize that, broadly speaking, this is these can be difficult issues to manage. There is a long history there. There is a long heritage there. All I can say is that in the case of Wilgenhof, the initial allegations and statements of racism were most unfortunate. And unfortunately, the moment racism is thrown onto the table, in our experience, in this case, the university appears to be rocked back onto their heels. And that is understandable, but it should not lead to ultimately poor decision-making once enough time has existed to establish the facts. And as in a case such as this, where the support for the Wilgenhof community from diverse voices, residents and past students of color, is so overwhelmingly positive.
Jaco, let me thank you for your time. Thank you so much for coming on to the show. Jaco Rabie there from the Wilgenhof Residence Alumni Association, of course, commenting there following the decision by Stellenbosch University Council to close down Wilgenhof Residence for the 2025 academic year.